Today, we're diving deep into one of life's most painful questions. And we're going to do it by uncovering a hidden plan, one that connects a really ancient story of suffering all the way to the event of the cross.
You know, it's a question that hits almost everyone at some point. Why do bad things happen to good people? The sheer injustice of it all can feel so random, and it can totally shake our deepest beliefs about the way the world is supposed to work.
And to even begin to tackle that, we've got to explore a few other massive questions that are tangled up in it. Like, why would a genuinely good man like Job be allowed to suffer so horribly? Or, going back even further, why were Adam and Eve ever put in a position where they could be tempted in the first place? And what does any of this tell us about God's love, really?
So let's begin with that classic, almost archetypal story of righteous suffering. A story centered on a man named Job. The first thing you absolutely have to get is that the story makes it crystal clear. Job is a good person. He's not just a decent guy. The text says he's blameless and upright. And this is so important because it tells us this is not a story about punishment. It's the exact opposite. And that's precisely what makes it so tough to wrap our heads around.
So why did all this happen to him? Well, what's fascinating is that the reason for Job's suffering doesn't start on earth at all. To get it, we have to pull the camera way back and look at a scene that's taken place in the heavenly realms. In this heavenly council, Satan basically throws down a challenge. He claims Job's faith is all just a transaction. You know, he's only good because you've blessed him. Take all that stuff away, and I guarantee he'll curse you. But look at God's purpose here. The test is allowed, not to see if Job will break, but to reveal the incredible depth of his faith, to see if that faith holds on even when there is literally no reason for it.
And the test that comes next is just absolutely devastating. It's not one single tragedy. It's this relentless, overwhelming wave of loss. First, his wealth is just wiped out. Then, all of his children are killed. Then, his own body is covered in painful sores. And as if that weren't enough, his friends show up and start accusing him of some secret sin.
And through almost all of this, God is completely silent. Now, for a lot of people, this is the hardest part of the story. Why not step in? Why not say something? The perspective here is that the silence isn't absence. It's an essential part of the process, a trial by fire, designed to forge a kind of faith that goes way beyond easy answers and simple human logic. Then, after 37 chapters of agonizing silence and debate, the turning point finally arrives. God speaks. But he doesn't speak in the way that anyone, especially Job, expected.
See, God doesn't give Job a neat little explanation. He doesn't say, "Okay, Job, here's the deal with Satan." Not at all. Instead, he unleashes the storm of questions of his own, revealing his jaw-dropping power and wisdom as the creator. The answer to Job's why wasn't a reason, it was a revelation of who God is.
And this just perfectly illustrates the core transformation that happens in Job. He moves from what you might call intellectual faith to real experiential knowledge. It's the difference between, say, reading a book about a person and actually meeting them face to face. And you can hear this exact shift in Job's own words. He says, "I've heard of you, but now my eye sees you." He's basically saying, everything I knew before was secondhand information. Now I've met you. And that direct encounter changes absolutely everything.
And here is the great paradox of the whole story. Satan's plan was to prove that Job would break and curse God. And what was the end result? Job's faith was proven to be unbreakable, and God restored everything he had lost, twice over. The very trial that was meant to destroy him resulted in a blessing that was twice as great.
Now, here's where it gets even more fascinating. This pattern, this idea of a trial started by an enemy that ultimately serves God's bigger purpose, it's not just a one-off thing with Job.
In fact, this pattern goes all the way back to the very beginning of the whole story, back to the Garden of Eden and the fall of humanity. I mean, think about the parallels. They're pretty striking. God gives humanity freedom with just one rule. An adversary, Satan, uses that freedom to introduce a test. Humanity fails. But here's the thing. Even that catastrophic failure isn't the end of the story. It becomes the very setup for God's much larger plan of redemption. Again,
You see an enemy's plot getting woven into a greater divine purpose.
So, this cosmic pattern of a trial being turned around for a greater purpose, it all builds towards an ultimate paradox, one that finds its most powerful, most world-changing expression in the person of Jesus Christ.
This right here, this is the heart of the entire thing. The cross was meant by Satan to be his final victory, the ultimate act of destruction to get rid of God's Son for good. But in the most stunning paradox imaginable, God turned the greatest act of evil into the greatest act of love. The very tool of execution became the instrument of salvation, defeating death and the devil himself.
And the outcome of this paradox is just immense. The cross wasn't just some event in history, it was this incredible act of power that destroys the authority of death itself, that gives believers the right to be called children of God, and it completely reframes suffering. Just like the book of Romans says, suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope.
And that brings us to this powerful final takeaway. From Job's personal pain all the way to the cosmic scale of the cross, the story is consistent. God can work through all things, even the deepest, most profound suffering, for an ultimate good. It suggests that while the reasons for our suffering might stay hidden from us, there could be a redemptive purpose unfolding that we just can't see yet. So maybe the question isn't just, why do we suffer, but what could this suffering be redeemed for?